Welcome back to Eye On. This week we have our Eye On Stroke Awareness. I'm Emma Widmar, a journalist with the Racine County Eye, and today I am joined by Loren Lamoreaux, Racine County Eye's editor. Loren, stroke awareness is a topic that hits close to home for you. Can you tell our viewers today about your personal experience with stroke awareness and being a caregiver for someone who had a stroke?
Yeah, unfortunately, one of my best friends, her name was Sarah King. She had a stroke September 8th of 2022. I found out about it the day afterwards. And what had happened in her case was she had a stroke in the late night, early morning. And her condo was actually up for sale and it had a lockbox on it. And the real estate agent was coming over in the morning and was knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell, and nobody was answering. Thankfully, there was a key in the lockbox, and the real estate agent was able to get in there, and they found Sarah on the floor. She had had a stroke and didn't, of course, nobody knew. She didn't know about it. And that's kind of what the initial thing was. And she was airlifted to a hospital. We spent several days in the neuro ICU. And then we were moved to the regular neuro floor at St. Luke's in Milwaukee, and for I think 3 weeks. And then we went to a nursing home in Kenosha where we kind of spent the rest of our time. She actually passed away January 19th of this year. And it was really hard. She's known my kids ever since my youngest was a baby, and she's now 16 years old. So she had quite a family relationship with us. So that's kind of what happened. And she, unfortunately for Sarah, she was never able to get out of bed after the stroke. And I know that's not the case for everybody. So I'm hoping that in sharing her story, and she actually asked if I could share her story before she died. She wanted to be on the news. So we're doing it a little late, but we're going to share with people. So hopefully we can save some lives.
Absolutely. There's never a bad time to raise awareness. Thank you for sharing all of that. I know it's not easy to talk about. I know that you played a huge role in being, her right hand person. So thank you for sharing. You kind of said we're getting to it late, but I think that we're getting to it at the right time. Can you tell people about, why is now such a good time to hear Sarah's story and what's coming up?
Yeah, amazingly enough, World Stroke Day is October 29th. And we want to get the word out because approximately 1 in 20 adult deaths are due to stroke per the CDC. And it's estimated that 80% of all strokes are preventable. So this is our mission. We want to get that word out. We want to help people because the longer someone after someone has had a stroke, the longer it takes to get treatment, the worse the outcome can be.
Right. And we want to avoid that as much as we can and keep people healthy and happy and moving along. I know you mentioned the CDC, but the American Heart Association is another great resource. They focus a lot on stroke awareness, and they put out a lot of preventative tips, helpful information about stroke awareness for both patients and caregivers of those who have had strokes. Can you kind of tell me what are some helpful signs and symptoms? Because it's not, there are things that, make someone more susceptible to having a stroke, but what's some information that, every day we can be looking out for in people, whether it's a family, a friend, a neighbor, just at the grocery store? What can we look out for in people?
Sure. First of all, if someone is having a stroke, the faster they get medical attention, the better.
Mm-hmm.
According to the American Heart Association, 1.9 million brain cells die every minute that a stroke goes untreated. It is an emergency.
Yeah.
Dire. So early treatment leads to higher survival rates and lower disability rates. And they have a little acronym. It's FAST. It's how to spot a stroke. FAST. F is face drooping. So if one of the sides of the face is drooping or is numb, ask the person to smile. If the smile is uneven, that's a sign.
Mhm.
A is arm weakness. Is one arm weak or numb? Ask the person to raise both of their arms. Does one arm drift downward? S in fast is speech difficulty. Is their speech slurred? Is a person unable to speak hard, or are they hard to understand? Ask the person to repeat a simple sentence like, the sky is blue. And then the T is time to call 911. If
Mhm.
someone shows any of these symptoms, even if the symptoms go away, and that's very important, call 911 and get to a hospital immediately.
Right. Yeah. I know that getting there, even like you said, if it goes away and they're not experiencing maybe that speech difficulty or the arm pain goes away, or weakness, it's still important to get there and get there fast. You know, the like you said, the earlier you intervene, the better. I know in Sarah's case, it was very unfortunate. You know, a whole day later, I can't imagine what that was like for her and those who loved her. Um, being her caregiver and being there after and knowing who she was before, what was it like for her? What things did she struggle with? And um how did you get through this? I mean, this is difficult. This is not an easy thing, whether she was blood or not related to you. This is tough. How did you cope with this too?
Yeah, so a lot to say here. um, First of all, like after her stroke, the biggest thing that I did was kept in constant contact with their medical providers, the support teams, and everything like that.
Mhm.
The progression after the stroke, of course, when I first saw her the next day, her speech was very slurred and things like that. Her paralysis, her left arm was paralyzed, and she had face drooping, just like in the FAST acronym. Um, and those things were slowly getting better every day. And then, of course, there were good days and bad days along the lines too, but she had where the stroke was in her brain saved her. She could have died much quicker, I guess you could say, because it was really close to where like the swallowing is
Mm.
controlled in your brain and things like that. But it just missed that. So she was able to still swallow on her own. And she had to drink, like they call it, nectar thick liquids, so that she wouldn't choke on her, water or whatever. But her eating was also a very big thing. She could only eat pureed foods, and she's picky. She was also learning disabled. I need to say that. So some things were more difficult for her to understand just on the normal basis.
Mhm.
Um, and so my partner actually taught himself how to make hospital grade, dairy free, because she couldn't have dairy either, pureed food. So he would cook her fresh food, pureed, every day, and we would take it to the hospital or to the nursing home, so that she would eat, because otherwise she wasn't eating at the hospital or the nursing home because she didn't like their food, or because their pureed food only had dairy in it. They did not have a non-dairy pureed food option, which is a big deal for people who have dairy problems. So
Yeah.
just to bring that awareness as well, you need to make sure that you're advocating for your people. And it could be something that simple, because that turned her around and she started eating and she started improving. And we thought, we could get through this.
Mm.
So then her paralysis also, of course, was a big thing. And we had a funny little hand gesture that we used to give each other all the time. And so I used that as like, to encourage her to
Yeah.
move her left hand. I want to see you make that hand gesture with your left hand. And when you do that, you'll get a prize or whatever,
Yeah.
and, but, the biggest thing we can focus on those types of things, the swallowing, the eating, the paralysis, mobility, but mentally and emotionally, there's a really big element as well, because especially, I mean, for anybody,
Yeah.
but in our case, with Sarah's disabilities, she was having a very hard time. The struggle was about, she felt like she couldn't do anything anymore. She felt like she was a baby again.
That's right.
And that's something that you can overlook when you're so busy thinking about all of the physical things that you're trying to help with. But emotionally, it is so hard on, yes, the caregivers, but the person who had the stroke, I think they can struggle quite a bit. So I would just say, like, most definitely the long-term challenges that were the most impactful was all on an emotional and mental level.
Mm,
There were support teams for physical therapy every day. There were, teams for all of the other things.
yeah.
So if your loved one has had a stroke, or if you've had a stroke, it's okay to, like, tell people, I need to talk about it, or if they're in a place where speech has not been affected, of course.
Yeah.
But, and if speech has been affected for a person, then it could be, even a lot more concerning. So just to make sure that you are remaining close with the person, and just, they have to have someone on their side that's not from the hospital who
Right.
can advocate for them.
Yeah.
I kind of made a joke that I was fluent in Sarah. Like, I could tell the hospital staff what she was talking about when she said X, Y, or Z. And
Yeah.
it was actually life-saving at some points. So, I mean, those are the things that I would say were the most lasting things for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's no matter what you're going through, stroke, heart attack, any trouble in life, it's always good to, keep mental health at the forefront. We often don't do that, and it puts us in even darker places. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it's something we overlook far too often, and it just adds to, the ongoing struggles. You touched on support, and I think that's really, really important to mention, because here in Racine, we are dedicated to helping those who have strokes and their caregivers after, because, like, life changes, you know, when you have a stroke, whether no matter what kind it is, or how long it lasted, or what the symptoms were, life changes for that person and their family and their support afterwards. And in Racine, we have um, a stroke support group for survivors and caregivers here at Ascension in Racine over on Spring Street. And earlier this year, I know that we highlighted them in an article, and they just provide so much great information. But as someone who's been down this road, can you kind of tell us more about, like, what that group entails, and you know what's available for people? Unfortunately, Sarah is no longer here with us, and um, I know you never had the chance to go, but I know that you're plugged into what they're all about. So can you tell me more?
Oh, for sure. Especially because, well, I edited the story. So I I would have loved to attend while Sarah was alive. That is for sure. Especially after reading the stories of the two different patients that you highlighted in the story, Emma.
Mhm.
Um, but the support group in Racine, it meets on the second Wednesday of each month, and they are there to connect patients and families and the community to the resources and the support that people need post stroke. And it's free of charge to anyone. And I actually, I actually would say, if someone is curious, even if they have a genuine fear of, maybe someone has got a predisposition or something, visit a support group, see what people look like. Not look like, but see what their lives look like,
Mhm.
and what the real impact of living post stroke is going to be like, or what it can be like. But patients and caregivers both have spoken about how positive this group is to attend. It just gives encouragement and community to
Mhm.
those they might feel scared or alone. And this is a whole new way of life. And that's something that's hard to take. Change, no one likes change really. So I think that it's most important just to make sure that we know when those things happen, if it's stroke or like you said, anything else, any other, significant medical change, to know not alone
Mhm.
and to know that there are people who actually want to be there for you. Um, they're waiting, they've got a chair for you, and they want you to sit there and feel that community, feel that encouragement, and know that you can get through it. I think that's just really the most important thing about the support group, really. When you stand with someone, you're stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. No one wants to go through something like this life altering, or, no matter if you are okay in, what does okay mean? But, even if you feel like after the stroke you can get back to the way life was before, um, it's great to have a friend in the fight, so to say. And that's so important for so many people. Like you said before, strokes really impact us. And it's unfortunate, but there are things we can do. And, today is one of them, just raising awareness by sharing Sarah's story. I wanted to ask, was there anything else that you feel like I should know about our viewers, our readers? Is there anything that they should know about Sarah's story or about strokes that might be beneficial?
Well, I would say number one, and I kind of touched on this already, if you're unsure about it,
Mhm.
the best thing to do is get checked out, period.
Yep.
If you or someone has a predisposition where you think it's a pretty good bet you might have a stroke at
Mhm.
some point, ask questions at doctor's appointments.
Mhm.
Learn these things before you need to know them, so
Mhm.
that if it happens, you can be fast, just like the acronym. um, but like I said too, attend a stroke support group, excuse me, and learn who these people are. And when I was younger, I would see people who had been victims of strokes. And of course, this was in the 80s, and our medicine wasn't quite as developed. So people who had had strokes mostly were a lot worse off than they are today. They are survivors today, they're thrivers today.
Mhm.
And had Sarah been able to make it through this, she had a lot of other issues in her life that were pre-existing. So this was not something that I felt was a failure in the medical community of her passing away.
Mhm.
It was, of course, devastating, but we had 4 months from the time of the stroke until the time of her death. And she was able to at least be loved and be cared for. She knew that she was loved and cared for. And that was the biggest thing for me. Was just to know that my dear friend, who was like a sister,
Yeah.
um she wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is, you have to be, if you're the caregiver, get a system of people. You can't be an island caregiver.
Mm.
My partner and I would rotate. We had a little schedule set up where he would go in one morning to the nursing home, and then I would go in the next morning. We would, and there was, her brother and his wife and her father. When he was able to be in town, he lives far away. But we had a support team that really rallied around her, and I think that's one of the most important things, because getting that feeling of disillusionment, your life is over kind of a thing, when you can get past that, you can open yourself up and start to heal, depending on the level of severity of the stroke, of course. And I'm not obviously a doctor, but um those things, I know those were fundamental in keeping Sarah for the 4 months that we had her. So just learn that FAST method, and ask the questions. They're going to be hard to
Mhm.
hear. They're going to be hard to learn, especially if you're already dealing with having had a stroke. But know that you can get through it, and know that there are people out there, support groups. There's so much information now. We have medical facilities here locally that are just fantastic.
Mhm.
And I think that the survival rate of stroke patients nowadays is just, it's bewildering to me because of what I remember from when I was a child and people having strokes. So there's so much advancement that's happened. So it's not a death sentence for everybody. It doesn't have to be. And the quicker you act, the better it will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, unfortunately, in Sarah's case, like you said, she has passed, but I think there's a lot of hope in her story and what you're taking away, her legacy of, you know, things didn't work out, um, the way one would hope, the ways that her loved ones would wish, but there's a lot of hope in her story, a lot of education, a lot of awareness. And um, I think she would be happy knowing, that her story means something and something is being done because of what she went through. So that's really inspiring. And I appreciate you taking the time to educate us, especially with World Stroke Day. It's coming up quick. And this is a great way for people to get educated on the matter. So thank you again for your willingness. As always, people can refer to the American Heart Association. There is more than you would ever imagine on their websites. There is resources available. There are people to talk to, and there's support all around. So this upcoming World Stroke Day, we know that we're not alone in this fight. There are people out there, and especially in the Racine community. So thank you, Loren, and thank you, Sarah, for sharing this story. I really appreciate it, and appreciate you having your eye on stroke awareness with me.
Absolutely.